Hi, good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Chavtes, Maseches Eruvin. I want to wish everybody a happy Labor Day. So we got off to the top of Chavtes Amud Aleph, 3, 6. It looks like 8 lines from the top. Omar Rava. We're going to continue, also with a very similar blot that we had last couple days. Regarding, we talked about. A person has, let's say he wants to extend, one of the ways is, let's say he wants to extend his Tchum Shabbos. So if, let's say he's not in a town, so he's in a small area, so he gets basically 2,000 amos each direction, but he wants to go somewhere which is 3,000 amos away. So what does he do? He sets up a meal, an Eruv, 1,000, let's say, amos in one direction, and then he has 2,000 amos in each direction from that meal, because that has become his new Shvisis Makom. That's the place where he's now, that's where his house is, quote unquote, his residency is a Shabbos. That is the new center, and it has to be food, and it has to be food for 2 meals. And we've been discussing what is considered to be food, how much do you need for the 2 meals, so on and so forth. So now it says Amar Rava, Hareini kiben Azai b'shuk Tveria. I am like Ben Azai in Shuk Tveria, who was there to answer questions. So Amar le'elmi Rabbanan le'Rava tapuchim b'kama. What about apples? Can apples? How many apples do you need for an eruv? Can you go ahead and use apples? Below, and why not? So any amount of food, any foods are mitzaref to one another to passel a person in his throat. The amount of chatzi pras is half a meal. In order a person, let's say, if he's tamei, he cannot go ahead and have food. So in other words, this is the amount that if he has enough of this tamei food from going ahead to eat truma. So this is really a derabbanan, right? Because food can't really make a person tamei. If he has enough tamei food, he should not go ahead and eat truma. And when it comes to food for 2 meals for an eruv, it would kabetza, and it also has to be the size of a kabetza when it comes to tamei tumas eichlin for tumas eichlin. So these halachas were set together by food, right? Now, so over here, what's the kasha? If it says all the foods, in other words, and apples are considered food, and it says all foods can be used as long as it's 2 sudas for an eruv. These are considered food. We said earlier a couple of blot ago, right? You can't learn from general rules. We said general rules, right? You can use all foods, so maybe this is not a general rule. Maybe apples are excluded. Because it says it says when it comes to food, right? Then it's 2 sudas for the eruv, and the next line says when it comes for an egg, latami tumas eichlin. In order to be matame tumas eichlin, has to be the size of an egg in order to be tumas eichlin. Bahani, and these apples. Nami b'nei tumas eichlin, and these apples, since they are matame tumas eichlin, therefore also they would apply also to the previous line, which said that you need 2 sudas for an eruv. So now, okay, you probably have a comment. How much? Rav Nachman tapuchim b'kav. Has to be a kav, right? Has to be a kav of apples, right? Which we'll soon see is basically for lug, right? We know, fine. So it comes to 4 lugin. Now, Meisve, who says you need for a kav of apples? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Aimer, uchla. Now, over here, we're talking about Meiser Ani. In terms of Meiser Ani, how much to go ahead and give the poor people. You give a tenth during the years of 3 and 6 of the Shemitah cycle, out of the 7 years. So uchla, when it comes to uchla, right? So it says uchla tavlin. So when it comes to tavlin, you have to go ahead and give an uchla of it, which is a small amount, right? Which is a 1/8 of a lug, all right? So 1/8 of a lug, right? And we talk about revius, right? When we revius is a quarter of a lug, right? You have to drink a revius wine, right? People say revius, right? Revius refers to, right? So he says over here, you have to drink an uchla as 1/8 of, when it comes to tavlin spices, the litra yerek, and when it comes to litra, right? That is 1 lug, right? V'asara egoizim, and 10 nuts, and v'chamisha fruskin, and then 5 peaches, shnei rimonim, and 2 pomegranates, v'esrog, and when it comes to esrog, echad, only 1. So these are the amounts for Meiser Ani. V'amar Gursak bar Dre Mishmei Rav Menashe bar Shiguvuli Mishmei Rav. They also the name of Rav V'chein le'erev. These are the measurements, not only the measurements for Ma'aseh, they're also the measurements for erev. Right, for erev, you want to go ahead and set up your erev. These are the amounts. If you're using nuts, you have to use 10 of them. Right, use peaches 5. So why didn't we say apples are just like peaches? Just like peaches are only 5, so to 5, you don't need a whole kav, right? A large amount, several, right? Several liters of it, right? Just you only need 5. So Gemara says no. Hani chashiv, hani chashiv. Maybe peaches are more chashiv. Since peaches are more chashiv, therefore they require only 5. But maybe when it comes to apples, they would need more. And Amar Rav Yosef Shara le Mare Rav Menashe bar Shiguvli, right? Let Shara le Mare, right? Let Hashem, right? Forgive Rav Menashe bar Shiguvli, right? He was the one who was quoted just before, right? In this previous quoting Rav, this is the V'chein le'erev, right? He was the one who quoted V'chein le'erev, the line before. So he said, Rav Yosef said, let Hashem forgive Rav Menashe for this statement. Why? Anam Risani le'mas nisan. I had the statement of Rav when he says V'chein le'erevin, going on a Mishnah, V'hu Amra Brisa, and he said it on that Brisa, right? That previous thing that we just quoted, right, by Meister Ani was referring to a Brisa, and there Rav Menashe quoted Rav saying V'chein le'erevin, and comes Rav Yosef and says no. Rav didn't say in that Brisa. He actually said it on the following Mishnah. That's now we learn in the Mishnah, and also would speak about my son, and then we'll say what the difference is, right? And you can't go ahead and give less to the ani on the threshing floor. If we're talking about wheat that has a half a kav, and if it's barley, the kav is sa'arin, and a full kav for sa'arim, you go ahead and give the poor person. Or meir chatzi kav sa'arin, only half a kav sa'arim. The kav, the chetzi, the kusmin, and you give a kav and a half for a kusmin of spelt. The kav grogeres, right? And you go ahead a kav of grogeres is dried figs. O mana devela, or mana of devela of pressed figs. And Rabbi Kiva Omer pras, he says no. On that shear is a pras, which is a chatzi mana, and v'chatzi lug yain, and a half a lug of wine. Rabbi Kiva Omer Ravis, he says no, not a half a lug, rather only if it's wine, it's only a quarter of a lug. Ravis shemen also a quarter of a lug for shemen. Rabbi Kiva Omer Shminis, he says no, an eighth, right, which you saw before was the different shear, which was like an uchla. With charcoal pears when it comes to other fruits. Amar Avashol Kadesh Yimikarim V'Yikach Behen Mezon Shtei Sudos. Other fruits, if you sell them and then you can go ahead and buy 2 meals, so that's the amount. So if it depending how what the cost of the fruits are to buy 2 meals, that's the amount of fruits. Amar Rav, and on that Rav says V'chein le'erev, and that Rav says just like Allah has here applied to Ma'aser Ani, so too applies to erev. Now. Okay, so what was the big deal, right? They're both opinions in Ma'aser Ani. Why was one more accurate than the other, or why was one a better one to learn out from? So if you want to say maybe in the first one it talks about tavlin, we said uchla for tavlin, and maybe the tavlin and maybe you can use, right? If he says so to all these measurements for Ma'aser Ani apply to erev, but it talks about other spices. You can't just use spices, right, for your meals, right? Because that's not that's not something that you eat. So what do we mean? Over here it says we're talking about raw wheat and barley, and that's not a meal, right? We don't eat that. So over here it says a half a lug of wine. And says Rav, right? And Rav says, right, we use 2 revis, 2 quarters of a lug of wine, right? Now 2 quarters is a half, right? So a shtei revius shayayin is the same thing as the chatzi lug. So he says, and by the fact that he needs this amount, in other words, he needs that half a lug. So so therefore, it must be therefore since it goes along with the same one, the amount of wine is the same, which is a half a lug. Right, because it's 2 meals, each one is revis. So therefore, l'chayra that the erev is going on the second one on the Mishnah and not the brisa shema mina. Fine, learn from here indeed. Fine. Amar Mar. So we say over there, ubamazon shtei sudos the erev. And when it comes to food, it has to be for 2 sudos for an erev. So maybe each one has to have a full meal. So now you can only have up to 2 foods, and each food should be a meal. So right? He said to him, no, it should even be, you have multiple things, even if it's a half or a third or a quarter, right? So then you can use that amount, right? I know when we talk about, using, when we make it like Erev Tafshilin, right? We have to, maybe we'll discuss that also. We say, 2 foods, right? Eggs and then bread or matzah or whatever it is. So that's 2 foods. Over here, you can have more than 2 foods, right? But it has to be enough of the foods together to be 2 meals. Fine. Gufa. Omar Rav Ma'arvin B'shtei Revis Shoyayin. So we mentioned earlier they make an Erev with 2 Revis of wine. Umi Be'ina Kulihai. And do you need that much? Wine enough to eat from it. In other words, that you basically use it as a dip. You dip the wine until you put some challah into it, and chemetz and also chemetz, right? When it comes to vinegar, in order to go ahead and dip your challah in it, right? The challah is the meal, and this is just like sort of like the side dish of the meal. And zeisim v'tzelim kedei lechol ben shtei sudos. And when it comes to onions or olives, in order to go ahead and eat 2 sudos. So my answer, hasam the chamra mevashla. Over there, we're talking about cooked wine, which is not necessarily used for drinking. This type of wine was used for dipping. So therefore, if it is dipping wine, then the amount of wine which is used for dipping for 2 meals. And Omar Mar Chaymetz Kadei Latababo, the vinegars in order to go ahead and dip it. And Omar Avgida Marav Kadei Latababo Mazon Shtei Suda Shel Yerek. In order to go ahead and dip, if you're going to have a meal, 2 meals of vegetables, the amount of dip you need for all those vegetables. And Ikadamar, some of the different version, Amar Avgida Marav Yerek Hanacha B'Shtei Sudas. Vegetables that are eaten at 2 meals. No, not the meals consist of only vegetables. Rather, if the vegetables are eaten at a meal, right? In order for this to get a side of vegetables, right? So then those vegetables be dipped in the chaymetz, in the vinegar. That's the amount of vinegar, which would be a smaller amount.
So and they're not you on state pseudos. They're coming to explain the state pseudos.
We're defining right, right? Because shtei pseudos is not the same for all foods. It's not the same for all foods.
The amount is different for food.
Correct, for different foods. Not even, we'll also, at the end of today's blot, we'll discuss individuals, right? Some people maybe eat more than others. We'll discuss individuals. But this is going on the foods. Now, each food has its own shear. And when it comes to olives and onions, then it's the amount needed for those to go ahead and eat it with mazon, to eat it with bread for 2 meals. And can you go ahead and over there, I guess they're for Shabbos. And someone came and he said, Rabbi Iravti Lativan, right? So he said, I made an Eruv over here, so I'm ordered, in order to travel to Tivin. And Hashivu Rav Meir ba'arba amashoy. Rav Meir says you can't travel out there, and in fact you stay right here because you already left your Dalet Amos, and you can't go ahead and make an error for that. So you see onions you can't use. So he says no, like Kash is not a contradiction. Ha ba'olim ha b'imos. Right? When it comes to the leaves are no good. When it comes to the bulbs, then the bulbs are fine of the onion. The time when a person, let's say he eats a onion, right? And he wakes in the morning and he's going to die, or he dies. They don't say, what did he die from? We know what he died from. He died from eating this onion. We're only talking about the leaves. He eats the leaves, right? If he eats the bulb, that's not a problem. Also, even with the leaves, we also don't say, Ella, turn the page, Delo, Absilas Zersa, right? When it doesn't grow, a Zeras, right? When it doesn't grow, the zeras basically the size from the thumb, right? It's basically the size of a hand, right? So we say the zeras, right? Also, when the leaves didn't grow that much, but if the leaves already grew to the size of a zeras, then it's not as problematic. It's not as dangerous. In Amara Papala, Amara Eladala Ishti Shikha, also if he does go ahead and drink beer with it. But if he drinks beer with even the small leaves, then he should not be in danger. But otherwise, he would be in danger. And similarly, Tan Rabbanan lo yochel adam batzal mipnei nachash shabo. A person should not go ahead and eat the onions because of the nachash shabo, right? The nachash is nachash usually means snake, but over here like the venom of it. One time Rabbi Chanina ate half an onion with half the I guess the poison in it, right? And what happened? V'chala, and he got sick. He's going to die. And then his chaverim were mispala on his behalf, and then he was miraculously saved because I guess the Jewish people needed him. And Amar Reb Zeir Amar Shmuel Sheikh.
Wait, we learned in the Mishnah that we could make it with anything. Now we're saying, well, not anything. Well, first of all, it said in the Mishnah, you can't do it with water and salt. But now we're saying,
right. So we just had before. We questioned the apples. Right. We questioned the apples, and we said, right. Well, so we questioned before, and we said that's not necessarily true because we actually the first part of the Gemara stated that you cannot necessarily always learn from a statement. And therefore, these from a general rule. So therefore, if something is dangerous, right, or if something is not really edible, if something shouldn't be eaten, then it should not be used as an eruv. So, Amar Reb Zeira, Amar Shmuel, Sheichar Marvin Bo. So it says beer. You can go ahead and make an eruv with it. Upaisel es a mikvah b'shlei shalugin, and you go pasel mikvah b'shlei shalugin. A mikvah needs to be 40 sa. And 40 sa of the water that's fit, right? That's not drawn water, right? That's flowing water, whatever, fresh water. So that water has to be 40 sa. Then afterwards, whatever liquids come in, we're not as much. But the initial 40 sa has to be kosher. And therefore, if you have 3 lug of beer, right, is part of that 40 sa, it's no good. So Rav Kana Pshita. So Rav Kana Sakashi says, why do you have to teach halakha? It should be obvious. What's the difference between that and colored water? The Tanai Rabbi Yossi that colored water goes ahead and passes a mikvah in 3 lugin. Over there, that's called water. That's called colored water or water. We know that drawn water, passes a mikvah. However, over here it's called beer. So maybe beer is like something else. Maybe it's not considered to be water, drawn water, and therefore maybe it wouldn't pass the mikvah with 3 lugin in the first 40. So Kamash Malon, it's not true. How much beer do you have to have? So Savar Rav Acha Berei de Rav Yosef coming to Rav Yosef the Meimar Betrain Revi Shichra, right? 2 quarters, right, of a shichra, right? So he says over here 2 quarters, and right as you point out here, right, is basically Rashi points out Trey Lugin, right? The lug rove kav. It has to be now a kav is comprised of 4 lug. Now remember, right? A lug, we said a revis of, but when we talk about revis, a revis halug, right? 1/4 of a lug, right? And a lug, right, is 1/4 of a kav, right? So 2 quarters of a kav is actually 2 lugin, right? So 2 lugin, right, versus, so we'll see. Now, it's not, as we learn in the Mishnah, hamaitzi yain mekadei mezigas sakos. One who goes ahead and he carries on Shabbos wine, enough to be for a diluted cup. The Tani law, kadem mezigas kos yafe has to be a good cup, and my kos yafe kos shabracha has to be a kos shabracha. Rav Nachman baravua kos shabracha tzarich shebo roiva revis, right? A kos shabracha has to be a quarter, right, of a revis. Kadeshim zagu v'yamod al revis. Not a quarter of revis. In order that if you go ahead and dilute it, it becomes a revis. Right? Because like Rabbi says, Rava kol chamra delo dari al chad lasmai lav chamru. Anything that you don't go ahead and add, right, 3 parts water and 1 part wine is not good cup. Okay, so now let's go back. So what do we see over here? The amount you have to carry on Shabbos is the amount of wine for a revis. All right. Now the amount you have to carry for a revis is a quarter of the revis. Right. So therefore, a quarter of the revis is the amount you have to go ahead and carry. The Ketani says over there, Shah kol mashkim b'revis, all right, and kol shayvchim b'revis, right, and everything else is for a revis, right? Everything else is a quarter, and that over there is referring to a quarter kav, right? So that over there is referring to a quarter kav, and this is referring to a quarter lug when it comes to wine, right? I mean, hasam al chad arba, and just like over there, we said it's 4-1. Hachanami al chad arba. So it's over here. It will be the same ratio of 4-1 when it comes with between wine and other liquids. So therefore, since wine, we said, is a half a lug, right? So therefore, times 4 is 2 lug, or a half a kav, when it comes to beer. However, belohi, maybe it's not the same. Maybe you can't learn the same ratios when it comes to carrying on Shabbos and for an Erev. Why? Over there, it has to do with chashivas. When it comes to carrying, it has to do with whatever is considered to be chashiv. And you carry that you're chai for. But over here, no, it's different. Maybe over here, it's different. Maybe people would drink beer, even if it's not chashiv. People would have a cup in the morning, a cup in the afternoon. So therefore, maybe you need less. Maybe you only need, right, a quarter, right, or revius of a lug in the morning, a revius of lug in the afternoon, and therefore they'll only be the same amount as wine, as opposed to having to have 2 lug of beer. And tamarim, what about dates? Bekama, how much? I'm Rav Yosef. Tamarim bekav, you have to have a full kav of dates. And I'm Rav Yosef, how do you know that? So the tiny when the rise achol grogos v'shilin tamarim. Let's say a person goes ahead and he eats somebody's grogos, his dried figs. He eats his dried figs, and they were truma, and now he has to go ahead and repay him and pay him back, and he pays him back with tamarim. Tavo alav bracha. So a bracha will come of him because he took figs and he paid with dates. Now, what's the case here that he gets a bracha? So if we're saying that he gives him the same value back, that he ate from him a zuz worth, and then he paid him back a zuz worth, so my tavo alav bracha. Right? What type? Why should he get a bracha? Right? He took $1 worth and he paid him back $1 worth. Just it was a different type of dollar, but why is it? So Ella, rather when you say Ella, maybe you say he took the same measurement. Maybe in the beginning he ate, right, a certain amount of figs, and they were worth a zuz. Maybe they paid him back with the same amount, the same measurement of dates, but that was worth 4 zuz instead of 1 zuz, and therefore it says bracha. Alma, what do you see over here? Tamara madifi. You see over here that dates are more chashuv than figs, right? Samarle Abai says no. So Abai says no. Really, he ate a zuz worth of dates, and he paid him back a zuz worth. Actually, a zuz worth of figs, and he paid him back a zuz worth of dates. What does that mean? He should be benched for paying back this way. Because he ate something which is basically hard to sell. It's hard to sell figs, and he paid him back on something with same value, which is easy to sell. So therefore, since he gave him back something easy to sell, therefore that's the reason why tavo alav bracha. All right, fine. Now, when it comes to shasisa. Shasisa, which is a type of food we've discussed it before, I think in Maseches Brachos. It's basically made of toasted wheat and honey, right? It's a type of, I don't know, it's like sort of like an oatmeal or something like that. Shasisa, so Amar of Acha Bar Pinchas Trey Shargushi, right? 2 spoonfuls of this is considered to be 2 meals, and kisane. And when it comes to roasted grains, Amar Abayi Trey Bune Pumbedisa, 2 bune was the measurements in Pumbedisa. And Amar Abai quoted his mother saying, Hani Kisana Malu Libiba. So these Kisana, these roasted grains, right? Malu Liba, they're good for the heart. Mavatim Echshavasan, right? And also Mavatel, bad thoughts, right? Worrisome thoughts. It's the Amar Abai and from Abai. It says, my mother said, Hi man, the Yisay Chosh Liba. A person basically has a heartache. Laisa Bisha de Atma. Go ahead and bring meat from the right leg of a dichra, of a ram. All right, the rista the nisan, right, and go ahead and bring the the fertilizer, right, of an animal from the month of Nisan. Bilaka kivuya derisa. If you can't get that, laisi sugaini deravasa. Go ahead and bring branches from an arava tree. Go ahead and basically burn them, fuel them either with the fertilizer, or fuel it with the branches from the arava tree, from the willow tree, and then eat that meat right from the right leg of the animal. Then afterwards, go ahead and drink wine afterwards, and then he'll feel better from his heartache or heartburn. And anything that's a lifton, anything that is basically sort of used as a dip right? Or that it's not the main course, but it's like a side. It's eaten along with the bread. In order that you should eat that amount that he eats with bread for the 2 meals, right? So whatever the amount of dip is, and kol she'ein liftan kadei lechol hemenu. However, if it's not eaten with bread, it's eaten on its own, then there has to be 2 meals worth of that. So basar chai, when it comes to raw meat, kadei lechol hemenu, right? In order to eat it on its own. And basar tzli, but roasted meat, Rabba Amar kadei lechol bo, in order to eat it with bread, and Rav Yosef Amar kadei lechol hemenu, in order to eat the full amount. And Amar Rav Yosef ben Amila, Rav Yosef says how to know to eat it on its own. Tahani parsi achli tavaki bo nama, because the Persians used to go ahead and eat the roasted meat right without bread. And Amar le'abayu parsi havi rubadalma. Well, I understand just because the Persians do it, everyone else, are they the majority of the world? Right? So now we go to the Mishnah. Big day on Neem. When it comes to the begadim of Neem, which is basically very small, the begadim of the Neem couldn't afford a lot. It was three. What's it called? 3 fingers by 3 fingers. 3 etzbos by 3 etzbos. We said over there. That's their anim. However, big day when it comes to a shirim, which is 3 tachim by 3 tachim, then that's their measurement of shirim, and not vice versa. Aval, but big day anim low. But when it comes to the big day shirim, right? When it comes to the neem, right? Then in other words, that's 3 tefachim, right? It would not become tummy. So in other words, we see that everything sticks to it. It's lane, right? And therefore, you don't confuse it too. So Persians should not go ahead and mix up the rest of the world. So if you want to say maybe it's l'chumra, maybe l'chumra, right? We only say the big day shirim for a shirim, not big day shirim for a niyim. And also the case of by Erevin, we only go l'chumra, and therefore we don't want to go ahead and say that you need the larger amount, and therefore it's have the 2 full meals and not just have it like as a side dish to be eaten with bread for the 2 meals. But Tan Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, right? When it comes to a sick person or a zaken, your meals are smaller, right? We don't go chumrah. We see by Erevin, we don't necessarily go chumrah. Lavasan over a person who eats a lot, right? A person who eats a huge amount, nevertheless, basuda beinos shakalda, nevertheless, for his suda is the average amount. So kasha, we see it's a kasha, and therefore we see that we don't necessarily we can't be mekel. So if we're mekel, so why are you going ahead and establishing the halacha when it comes to roasted meat like those of Persia? You should be like everyone else in the world who basically go ahead and eat it with bread, and there should be this smaller amounts. And we will stop over here. All right, shkoyach everybody. Have a wonderful day. And davening is in 14 minutes. Bye-bye.
Shkoyach.
I thought we were going to start doing... Shkoyach. Didn't you say we're going to start doing doubles to catch up or to make
Yeah, maybe he'll add on tomorrow.
Yeah, I thought
Actually, no,
that was the discussion on Sunday, wasn't it?